Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Hawkeye Nation, to another episode of the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast, your daily podcast covering your Iowa Hawkeyes on the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I am your host, Andrew Wade, and if you are on the YouTube channel, you can see that I'm joined by a very special guest. Nick has joined me on a lot of episodes talking NFL draft. It's always a pleasure having you on, and just to give fans a preview, we're going to be going through every single Iowa Hawkeye draft prospect. Now, we're going to mostly focus on some of the top guys. We'll quickly hit on some of the other guys like the Ivory, Kelly Martins, but that will take up a little bit of our time, not nearly as much as the Tyler Linderbaums, Dane Beltons, and Tyler Goodsons. That is our show, though, for today. So let's get into it. First, I want to thank you all for making the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast your first listen every single day. Again, you can find us wherever you get podcasts at and also on YouTube by searching Locked On Hawkeyes. And Nick, it is a pleasure having you on, man. It's kind of bittersweet. You've been on a lot of shows with me. I think probably it's like your 7th or 8th show talking NFL draft. You come on every single year. I love your analysis. I know you love the Iowa Hawkeyes, so it just fits really well. And these are my final shows, and I'm doing it with you. So thank you for being the final guest of the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast with me as the host, man.
Yeah, no, it's been a fun journey. I always love tuning in too. I'll be honest, like we were talking about earlier, I am so, neck deep into the football stuff that I don't always listen to all the other content, even though I know you do good work with the basketball stuff. But thanks for having me on to talk a little bit of draft. I try not to be super biased with covering the Broncos, but when it comes to the Hawkeyes, I have a hard time with that. I kind of dove into that for, I guess, just good, proper analysis. So I'll do my best not to be biased with these guys. But, last year, I think swinging back on it, we're talking like Alaric Jackson. It's like, oh, where can he go? Day 2. I'm like, he's going to fall. The arm length isn't there. It's like, as stupid as it sounds, it matters. There's too much data to say that it does matter to ignore it. So it'll be fun to see. Maybe not as star-studded with the Hawkeyes this season, but a few definitely prominent guys to talk about.
Yeah, it's going to be a bit more. I think it's a bit more interesting of the draft. Last year, you had Davian Nixon, who was looked at initially as a first rounder, just kept slipping throughout. Chauncey Golston surprisingly goes in the 3rd round. Alaric Jackson, obviously UDFA. Just kind of an interesting draft all around for the Iowa Hawkeyes. Not nearly as much star-studded talent as we would have hoped. This year, we have a few early entrants. Plus, we have Tyler Linderbaum, which is also an early entrant, but a guy who many Iowa fans are very excited about, but also getting very pissed off about. Let's actually kick it off right there. You talk about the arm length with Alaric Jackson. I've been talking ad nauseum about Tyler Linderbaum and the fact that I understand why Iowa fans are frustrated to see him go in the back end of the 1st round. I understand the frustrations because when you look at him on tape, he's just a mauler. He does everything well. His technique is phenomenal. He hustles. He's just a truly fantastic center. But measurables do matter. There is reasons why people look at the measurables. It's not to say this person's going to stink, but it makes you go look at the tape again to say, is this going to impact this player when they get to the next level? So I want to hear your thoughts on the short arms, the undersized body, right? Under 300 pounds, 6'3". What are your thoughts on that? Can you give a little bit of a explanation as to why that's so important in the NFL?
Oh, I mean, at the NFL level, centers, luckily, they're going to be working with double teams a lot of times, combo blocks with the guards, but there's going to be times sometimes, especially with how teams like to use simulated pressure, where Tyler Linderbaum will be isolated against a nose tackle. And if he's going up against Vita Vea right now, 330 pounds, and he's engaging with Tyler Linderbaum before he can strike, that's a big issue. There's a reason teams want arm length. It's whoever can strike first a lot of times can win to start those battles. So that's a concern with Linderbaum. And it's something that the arms are short, but they're also like, let me pull up the data right here. I have it right here. The arm length is in the 1st percentile for offensive linemen all time. That's not good. That's not what you want to see. So that's a concern still. Tape is number 1. The other stuff does matter, and you're looking for reasons in the draft why not to take guys, why not to value them versus what makes them good. It's more the coaches like, okay, tell me what he can do, the evaluators, the personnel. Okay, here's what he can't do. Here's what he doesn't fit. So it is a concern with Linderbaum. The tape, though, is still so great. He's tenacious. He sticks on his blocks really well. He mirrors guys well. His technique is great. The leverage isn't an issue with him, and you can see that with the wrestling background. He looks to stick on guys as well. If they have counter blocks or anything, he will fight back with them. And what makes him really valuable is his movement skills at the position, his ability to hit landmarks at the second level. He's going to be great for an outside zone scheme, but that's something that maybe is another reason he's falling as well. Not every single team is running the wide zone Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay blocking scheme that the Iowa Hawkeyes have done as well. If you're more of a power gap centric scheme, Tyler Linderbaum's going to have to, or your center is going to have more on one drive blocking one-on-one opportunities. That's not really Tyler Linderbaum's game compared to some other centers available. The other thing about Tyler Linderbaum, and if you guys have listened to any of my work or you know any of my work as well, it's the positional value. The center is probably one of the least valuable positions in football. There hasn't been a center drafted in the top 10 since Nick Mangold. I think that was over 10, 15 years
Just a
ago.
long time ago.
Yeah,
At
long
Ohio
time.
State.
Yes, Nick Mangold, exactly. The long hair. I think his sister was a wrestler or something too. But cool family.
You
And the
should
last
check out his Wikipedia page, man. Holy, I just pulled it up real quick. His front picture is ridiculous. Sorry, and he was picked 29th.
Nick Mangold was picked. Okay, well then I'm totally wrong. I thought he was earlier. Okay, so I can't even tell you the last time a center was drafted number 10. I think Garrett Bradbury for the Minnesota Vikings went 14 overall, and he's been not a great pick so far. I mean, how many times has Kenny Clark had Garrett Bradbury on Kirk Cousins' lap? As soon as the snap happened. So that's something to be considering as well with Tyler Linderbaum. It's just the positional versatility, the scheme versatility, the value of the center position, et cetera, et cetera. But that being said, his floor is astronomically high. And if you are looking for just getting the best offensive lineman possible, specifically for a zone wide scheme, definitely should take him. He should go in the first round. I think it was Daniel Jeremiah, NFL Network, said that some teams actually have sorry, Hawkeye fans for this one. I hate this just as much, but some NFL teams have Cam Jergens from Nebraska as high or higher than Tyler Linderbaum. And Cam Jergens' tape is really good as well. I'm not going to discredit him.
You just got to forget these 4 misfired snaps against Iowa.
Yeah, other than that, but the length, the movement skills, and also probably a little bit more positional versatility, can play some guard and some power scheme as well. So that's something to look for. But again, like a team like Cincinnati at pick 31, if he could go there and snap the ball to Joe Burrow, I mean, that would be amazing for everybody involved, unless you're cheering for an opponent of the Bengals, a divisional rival.
Yeah, and when you look at the Bengals, they've retooled their offensive line, plugging Tyler Linderbaum in there. I've talked about this a little bit, but I feel pretty good because the X's and O's, the scheme fits are not really my forte. But I feel good because the stuff I was talking about was similar to you with not as much depth. So I feel pretty good about how I was looking at Tyler Linderbaum. When you look at Cincinnati, they have a retooled offensive line. You put Tyler Linderbaum in the middle there. He's going to be going into a very good situation, surrounded by a lot of, a much better offensive line than what we saw over their Super Bowl run. What other schemes do you feel like? You talked about the Kyle Shanahan, so you're thinking maybe like San Francisco, Miami could look good, Cincinnati. What are other systems that kind of run, or what are other teams that run similar systems?
A lot of teams right now are trying to run that wide zone scheme because of the success of Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay. So there's a lot of options to look for there. Cincinnati is obviously one of the teams that comes to mind. Green Bay is running a variation of it with Matt LaFleur. So maybe that's a team that looks to get a center there to help Rodgers down the stretch. You also have let me see. You have the Philadelphia Eagles with Scangarini is another option there.
The popular Eagles, mock draft pick. They have 3 draft picks, so.
Yep, and the Minnesota Vikings as well as another team. The Denver Broncos, also, they probably won't get a chance at Tyler Linderbaum, but that's another team that's running that outside zone stretch. And teams run a little bit of everything nowadays. It's not as, we're going to run outside zone stretch to the weak side of the field every time. Sorry, Hawkeye fans, had to get a little dig there on that one. But there's a lot of variation as well. But bread and butter teams looking at, I think that's one that those are the teams that stick out to me in my mind.
That makes sense. I definitely can understand that with this draft, because there's a lot of talk about how there's not as much high end talent, right? There's not as much tier 1 elite level talent. How much does that help potentially Tyler Linderbaum, where teams are like, can I just get out of this first round with someone who's going to be an impact player, not necessarily a 15-year perennial Pro Bowl type player, but just an impact player? How much does that help or hurt Tyler Linderbaum?
It definitely helps. It definitely helps him. There's, especially with the draft process somewhat changing this year, having somebody with such a high floor matters, and having somebody who can be a plus player on the offensive line. He's a plug and forget kind of guy for your scheme. I do worry that if there's maybe a team that has a little bit of instability along the coaching staff, maybe like Carolina Panthers trade down from 6 and need to plug the offensive line, that maybe getting somebody who is so scheme specific as Tyler Linderbaum means that you limit yourself as to what type of coaches and schemes you can go with in the future. So there's always that kind of thing as well. That's why you're looking for guys who are more scheme versatile. That's another reason that Linderbaum might fall. But again, if you're talking like late in the draft, you might have to scheme to help him a little bit on some, pass reps and whatnot against the behemoth nose tackle, zero tech types. But still, what he brings in the run game is a plus. And I know there's a lot of talk about the run game being devalued from a statistical perception. It is, so to speak, but it's more nuanced than that. A lot of it comes down to teams today, and you can thank Vic Fangio and his disciples for that. They're going to live in nickel and dime no matter what. You want to play 12 personnel? I don't care. I'm not going to put on another linebacker because linebackers aren't super valuable or good in today's NFL.
Yeah.
So in order to make sure you can combat that, running out of 11 personnel and running effectively is going to be super valuable in the league going forward. So if you have a plus blockers on the line where they're taking it to defenses that are only playing 6 guys in the box, there's going to be value to that. That's why guys like Derrick Henry, these big bruising running backs, are actually getting a little bit more value again compared to some of the smaller scat backs. So there's still be value for the run blocking and what Tyler Linderbaum can bring.
Absolutely. It's always interesting to see how the NFL ebbs and flows and how, you counteract something, you then counter that counter, you counter that counter, and then you kind of get back to something that was going on 10, 15 years ago. You see, obviously, the Shanahan principles being all the rage now. Obviously, as Bronco fans, we saw that when we were 7, 8, 9, 10. That was something we grew up seeing. So pretty cool stuff there. You mentioned the Vic Fangio and playing a lot of dime and nickel. A guy who I want to talk about next is Dane Belton. And I think his positional versatility that we saw at Iowa could be a plus for him at the next level. He tested really well. I'm so glad that he was able to test in the 4.4s for the 40, jump well. I think that's definitely going to help with his draft stock. Let's start with this though. What position does he play in the NFL? And could he have that versatility? We've seen Amani Hooker really play that third safety of the Tennessee Titans. Does he have that similar kind of role, or what do you see from him?
I think he can have that similar kind of role. And something about, again, another draft thing is just because you haven't seen somebody do something doesn't mean they can't. And with Dane Belton, if he's going to be probably a super valuable safety in the next level, he's going to have to work on some 2 high shells, maybe even some single high, which we didn't see that much from Iowa with Merriweather and names escape. Yes,
Jack Kerner.
Jack Kerner. I'm like, no, it's not Jake Gervais. But Jack Kerner at the other safety.
The other
spot.
walk on right after him. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just plug in another one. Who's next? Could be you and me. Who knows?
Yeah.
But I still have my eligibility. But no, he would definitely be, I think, be a great fit there for that similar role as a Hooker. And I honestly think that Belton might have better ball skills and zone instincts right away. I do not think he is as quick burst to get downhill and make tackles as Hooker was coming out of college. But in today's NFL, you're going to be playing more 3 safety defensive backs, and safeties, the more hats you can wear, the better. 2 high safety shells, coming down and playing the slot, playing the box. Belton has done a little bit of everything for that Iowa defense as far as that versatility. Didn't seem as much on the back end, but doesn't really matter to me as much. And again, coming away with, 5 interceptions last year. A lot of those interceptions really displayed good patience.
They were tough.
Yeah, those were not just, gimme sacks. Those were plays that he made. So I really am excited about what he can do at the next level. I'm honestly just, again, kind of being a little bit homerish here with the Hawkeyes, but if the Broncos haven't taken a defensive back come pick 96 and he's still there, I would be ecstatic about it. I think he'd be a great fit there for them. Again, not a lot of free safety snaps. Pro Football Focus had him at 536 reps last season at the slot compared to 290 in the box and only 57 at free safety. Just because he hasn't done it doesn't mean he can't. His athletic profile suggests he can. So that's the biggest thing. And today's quick NFL, you're talking about RPOs, zone reads, quick pass options, etc. You need that, I guess, that slot player to be a good player against the run and a good tackler, and Belton can do that as well. So I really like Belton. I think he's being slept on in a pretty darn talented safety class, and a pretty darn talented safety class in the Big Ten. I mean, that's just Daxton Hill, Brisker. You got Kirby Joseph. You got Nick Cross. Man, the Big Ten, some good safeties this year. Really excited about that.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack with what you just said. I'm trying to figure out. Yeah, no, I was like thinking about the things I was going to ask you next. I'm trying to think about where I go with that. I'm going to start with the Dane Belton and the snap count. You mentioned obviously only 57 snaps at that free safety position. I wanted to call it out for the Iowa fans out there listening. A lot of that has to do with the fact that Iowa values that dime backer position so heavily. They value someone who can play that slot corner spot so heavily. They value having Dane Belton and being able to move him around. But when Iowa was going up against a Wisconsin or a team that did run a lot of 12 personnel, they were going to move to a 4-3. And you see Justin Jacobs hit that linebacker spot, and you saw Dane Belton move back to the safety spot. So you saw him take over Kayvon Merriweather's spot. So it wasn't that Iowa didn't feel comfortable with him there. It was more the fact that Iowa needed him in that slot corner spot more so than what they needed him at that safety spot. And they had other people who could take over that position. So that was definitely something I wanted to call out. You mentioned Denver taking him at 96. And obviously, there's a lot of people that listen to this who are also Broncos fans. I'm a huge Broncos fan, as you know, and as you are as well. They've mentioned the fact they want to play 6 defensive backs often, and you need that versatility. Kareem Jackson is not back. We don't know kind of what's going on with some of the cornerback spots as well. Michael Ojemudia has been injured quite a bit over his career. There's a lot of interesting stuff happening in that defensive back room. I'm sure it'll all get figured out. I thought Dane Belton might be a good fit there because he has that versatility. You mentioned it, pick 96, and to me, that seems high than what I was anticipating, simply because you look at Amani Hooker, he slid to the 4th round, got drafted by the Titans. He was definitely a big pickup in that 4th round. I felt like he slid a little bit because people weren't even really ready for him to declare. And I wonder if that has a similar problem with Dane Belton. People weren't ready for Dane Belton to declare. Do you feel like it is realistic that Dane Belton could actually go on day 2?
I do think it's realistic. He tested well, and the ball skills matter. I mean, turnovers are so important in today's NFL, and you see that from Belton as well. He tested fine enough. Definitely, I think his ROS was above 9, which is really good. That's a relative athletic score for his size, and I think his agilities were also fine. So I definitely think it's possible. The thing that might go against him is it is a deeper safety class, and the thing about Hooker also is Hooker walked so Belton could run, that kind of thing. And you
Yeah.
saw the safety already work from this exact scheme. It's translated. You're seeing more and more dime backs. It's becoming the NFL, and you can blame football in the South for this, but the 7-on-7s is really influencing the NFL today. It's finally reached that point where it's mainly about the pass game and the dime backers. And if it's using the run game as more to make other teams have to dictate personnel to respect it versus actually running the football on them. So in the NFL, the college is a little different. You don't have the quality of quarterback play to do that in college for every team. But in the NFL, you can. So I definitely think it's possible he could go down there. His testing is good. I do wish he had a little bit more tape on the back end to evaluate, because that's going to be hopefully his primary role in the NFL. If you're just a third safety, you're not going to be as valuable. But again, there's value. There's also special teams value for everything that he did as well. Safeties are going to be big special teams contributors. So I definitely think it's possible. Late round 3 to mid round 4, I think that's probably where you should expect Belton to be selected, in my opinion.
I love that, man. That's exciting. So let's move on to Tyler Goodson, another guy who had a fantastic combine, and arguably a completely different situation than Dane Belton, where he has a ton of tape. He's been running the ball for Iowa predominantly since the mid part of his freshman year, and he's had some really good tape. He's also had some pretty concerning things that you see on tape as well. I thought he tested really well, though, getting that 4.440, getting the weight. You look at him, you kind of, at least initially, you think of Akram Wadley, you think of that agility and the ability to kind of make things happen in space. Tyler Goodson showed up bigger than Akram Wadley and a significantly better tester than Akram Wadley, who ultimately went undrafted. And I think character is arguably much better with Tyler Goodson. I don't know why I had to throw that in there, but I thought it was important as well. What are your thoughts, though, on Tyler Goodson with his combine performance, and what are your thoughts on the amount of tape? What are NFL evaluators going to be looking at? Is it his sophomore year, or is it his junior year where no one could block anyone except for Tyler Linderbaum?
Yeah, they're going to have to look at both of it, but this is kind of circling back on our conversation earlier, where teams are looking to punish opponents if they're playing dime defenses and if they're playing 6 guys in the box. And that means your smaller running backs are going to get devalued, even if they are home run hitters. And Tyler Goodson came in 197 pounds, 5'9". I mean, I think a lot of teams are looking for the guys who are 220-ish right now to punish those light boxes and get you out of those 2 high shells. Like, they want you to play cover 1 and cover 3 because you can get more explosive plays down the field versus those defenses compared to a match quarters or a cover 2 look or a cover 4 look. So that's something that I do think will devalue Goodson a little bit. I also think that in today's NFL, I have some non-negotiables or non-starters for like picks in the first 4 rounds of the top like 150, and one of them is pass blocking. And Tyler Goodson, because of his size, that's always going to be something that's a little bit questionable for him. It kind of reminds me a little bit of, and this is just relations for us. Philip Lindsay, really good, but if
Yeah.
he's on the field, that it's going to be a run because they're not going to trust him to be back there in pass protection versus a free rusher, whether it be an edge or a linebacker or anything like that. And didn't see enough from Tyler Goodson nuanced wise in the pass game. You can blame the offensive tackles for that. You can blame the quarterback, the coordinator. I don't care, but we just haven't seen it. So it's an unknown for Tyler Goodson in that regard. So I think he will get drafted still. I think it'll probably be in that round 5 to 7 range. I could see a team that is still really good at running 12 or 21 personnel that can utilize the speed back rather than take advantage of the box, is a team like the 49ers. I could see them being a fit for him. They really tend to value the speed and the home run hitters more than a lot of teams are pivoting to right now in the NFL, and maybe Miami as well. They're trying to get that zone blocking scheme going in there with Mike McDaniel coming over from the 49ers, and they don't have that home run hitter. But I don't see Goodson going super high because of the size, because of the pass protection question marks that he has, which again, for me, non-starter. If you can't pass protect, you're not going to see the field as a running back. As people are like, oh, he's a running back. Why does that matter? It matters because he's protecting the most important thing in the entire franchise. And if my running back gets that guy hurt, I'm going to be livid. So that's something that's just, again, non-starter, but he's going to be fine. He's going to have a niche in the league. He's going to be a home run hitter, kind of a slasher. I'd like to see him be a little bit more aggressive hitting the holes with his vision. Some of that might be him trying to do too much with an offensive tackle situation last year that was as bad as I can remember for the Iowa Hawkeyes. So he'll be fine. It's just, I think the actual type of running back that he is slightly devalued right now compared to the league, in a league that's never been devaluating the position more.
Yeah. And I think it's important to note that the pass blocking thing is so important because you need to be able to disguise as much as you can with your offense. And if you have a guy back there that he ain't blocking you, or if he is, you're getting a relatively easy rush attempt at the quarterback. It just hurts you as an offense. You mentioned the big bruising backs. I think for Iowa fans out there, it's important to note LaShawn Williams, 5'10", 205, Gavin Williams, 6'2", 12. Iowa's putting some weight on those guys, and they have hit the hole really well. I actually really liked what I saw from both those guys in the bowl game, hitting the hole hard. You already answered the next question I was going to ask, which was, what were your thoughts on Tyler Goodson dancing? We saw him against Maryland spin some guys out of their shoes, make some things happen, but then a lot of times we saw Tyler Goodson take 2-yard losses at a rate that was arguably the worst we've ever seen for an Iowa running back. Anything else you want to add on that, or is that you're pretty much good? Like, he just dances sometimes. We don't know why he's dancing. He needs to hit the hole harder.
I feel like they put a lot of pressure on him to create when the running back, as valuable as running backs are, typically they're only ever as good as their offensive line. So if the offensive line is going to struggle, you're not going to maximize that running back. So that's probably the biggest thing with Goodson. But my biggest issue with me is, again, the style of play he has, the size he has. I just think that it's probably devalued compared to what it was even 5 years ago. So will be interesting to see what happens. I'm really pulling for him. He seems like a really great kid coming from a great family as well. And he's going to get a chance in the league, no doubt about it. And he's going to get touches in the league. It's a running back by committee league as it is. Nobody's getting 25 plus carries a game every game of the year, especially with the expanded schedule and how many teams are leaning on those rookie running backs. Not to make them sound terrible, but running backs in general, the philosophy kind of is the old Mike Shanahan model where you draft them, you use the heck out of them for 4 years, and then you let them walk. You don't pay them, and then you just draft another one right behind him. So that first contract, it's not good for those running backs trying to make money long-term for that second contract, but that's just the way of the league right now, and that's the way it's set up. So he's going to get a chance early on. I hope it goes to a good scheme fit and a good run-blocking team, because if he can get to the second level, that's when fun can happen with Tyler Goodson, as Iowa fans know handily.
Absolutely. I'm going to throw a pop quiz at you. Can you name in the next 30 seconds the last 6 1,000-yard rushers, Terrell Davis, and then the next 5 after that in the Mike Shanahan system?
Oh, in the after Terrell Davis?
Yep.
Reuben Drones.
I believe he was one. Yep.
You also have Clinton Portis.
Yep.
You also have, did Peyton Hillis do it? I don't think he did.
I don't know if he did. Let me check.
I think maybe Noshan Reno did it, unless it was overall yardage because he was part of the pass game on that last year.
Peyton Hillis did not.
Okay. 1,000-yard rusher. Well, Philip Lindsay did.
Philip Lindsay did. You're missing two
Mike
guys
Mike
though.
Mike Anderson.
Yep. And
Did Willis McGahee?
Willis McGahee did get 1,000 yards. You're still so the other one
Okay.
right after Terrell Davis was Olandis Gary.
What about Tatum Bell?
Tatum Bell, let me check. He did have 1,000. Oh, he barely cracked 1,000. Yeah, Tatum Bell out of Oklahoma State.
There
I
you
was
go.
so pumped for him. I was like, we traded Clinton Portis, we get Champ Bailey, and then we draft Tatum Bell, which is like the second coming of Clinton Portis, and then he just washed out very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, that's the running back thing. Rookie
Yeah.
contract, use them, they have a good scheme for them, and then they're the most valuable on their rookie contract. That's why teams like Dallas paying their running backs huge money, and then, oh no, we can't pay Amari Cooper anymore. We can't keep
You
Randy
sell him for
Gregory.
parts.
Yep, you can't do it because you're paying that running back big money when you already used up their best years, most likely. Sometimes you have a Frank Gore out there, sometimes you got a Derrick Henry, but those are outliers, and you should not bank the future on outliers.
100% agree. Moving on to the next, probably most draftable guy, I believe, Matt Hinkins. Matt Hinkins has had a very interesting Iowa career, starting for the better part of 5 years, losing his job occasionally, but coming back his fifth and final season due to the COVID year of eligibility. Started off pretty well. Him and Riley Moss formed a very good duo.
Yeah.
Riley Moss gets hurt. Matt Hinkins then takes over, gets screwed, had to play Purdue, and it looked like Iowa tried to do some different things. They tried going man coverage with Matt Hankins on David Bell, saying, you know what, we're going to put one of our top guys there. Matt Hankins didn't look good, but it also looked like he may have hurt his shoulder. And then I think destroys his hamstring late in the season, doesn't dress for the Illinois game. Honestly, just very, it just made sense. Like that is just if you could sum up Matt Hankins' career in a season, it was that, right? I mean, just so up and down, injury based. It seems like he might be flying under the radar, but he's also we haven't heard anything on his testing. I mean, where do you see Matt Hankins in this process? Where is he going to be drafted at?
I think he's going to go round 4 or round 5. I think he's lacking the elite traits that you want at the cornerback position. That's a position where typically the best ones go in the first round because their ability in the next level is tangible based on a lot of the athletic measurables they have. And unfortunately for Hankins, this is a big plus for Phil Parker in the Iowa defense, but Hankins, with Iowa dropping guys into pretty static zone coverage a lot of times, doesn't have a lot of versatility as far as what he's asked to do coverage wise. That's one of the reasons that Michael Ojemudia really made a lot of money going to the Senior Bowl, because a lot of it's
He
off
did
coverage.
so well in man coverage.
Yes. Yeah. But you don't have that at Iowa on tape. So it's a missing puzzle. Doesn't mean he can't do it, but that means you have to project him some. And because he wasn't a combine invite, didn't get to do the field drills there, you're relying on the pro day and the tape in general. But I think he has enough there that I would love to bring it. If I needed a developmental cornerback, day 3 of the draft, that I think has some inside outside versatility and is a good tackler, which to me projects well to special teams, that's the money you want. That's the kind of guy you want there in that range. Still, I would not bank on him to be a starting cornerback in the NFL, but I think there's some developmental upside there. I have liked Hankins for a while. I love the mentality. Again, cornerbacks who can tackle, you have to have that in today's NFL. There's no plus ones anymore when it comes to that. So Hankins, I'd be thrilled. Like if Denver wants to bring in somebody to push behind Frank Darby, who's always injured there. Ronald Darby, who's always injured there. Special teams upside. That's a good range for him. So I think he's being slept on a good bit.
Yeah, I love that. And you talk about the tackling. The play that sticks out in my mind is against, I think it was Penn State. They throw a swing route, and he just absolutely annihilates the running back, forces an incomplete pass. Matt Hankins, pretty solid. I was shocked he didn't go to the combine.
Yeah, me
I
too.
didn't see anything from testing at the pro day. Did you see any testing numbers? I didn't see here. It was tough to get any testing numbers out of the Iowa's pro day.
I didn't see any testing numbers. I was looking for a bunch of it as well, because there's a guy that we haven't talked about yet that I'm interested in talking about a bit. But Hankins is one that I think he will get drafted. He's not going to be an undrafted player. He's going to get a chance in the league, and I think he's got a chance to get better in the league. My big question is, he's been in the, what is he? Was he a redshirt senior this last year for Iowa? And he's still only 175 pounds. Does he have the frame to put on more weight? And is that something that's going to be a durability question for him consistently? Because guys, Big Ten football is big boy football, but we're talking like men at the next level. It's going to be different. And if you're 6'1", 175, you're gonna have some issues.
And especially him too, because you look at Iowa and they are known for being able to develop these kids.
Yeah.
or these young adults, and the fact that he couldn't put on weight despite that, you
Mhm.
get a little concerned.
Yep.
Is the next guy you want to talk about Jack Kerner or Zach Van Valkenburg?
Neither.
Kyler Schott?
Kyler Schott.
All right, we can go to Kyler Schott. What are your thoughts on Kyler Schott? We talked a little bit in the Twitter DMs, and you had mentioned you like the idea of him maybe moving to center. But
Yes.
what are your thoughts on Kyler Schott? Let's just start off. What an amazing! You just love those journeys where he's a farm boy, walks on to the Hawks, becomes a starter. This year, injuring himself, getting off a baling hay. I mean, just such an Iowa kid through and through. You gotta love the story. But what are your thoughts on Kyler Schott?
I mean, everybody loves the guy as well, talking about him being a beloved player in the locker room, a good personality guy. And while his size does not really lend itself to be a guard at the next level, I really would have loved to have seen him at center. But hey, Iowa already had the best zone blocking center in all of football. So what are you going to do? Not play him? No, you're going to play Kyler Shot and you'll put him at left guard. And the injuries were a concern. But I am really curious with the intelligence, the work ethic, the movement skills that I see on tape. If he would translate to the center position and maybe be an undrafted free agent or seventh round kind of guy, you take a flyer on and maybe have him as a practice squad player year one, change his body, work on the nuance of calling protections and the snapping and whatnot. But I think that's actually a fit for him at the next level. That would intrigue me a lot. Coaches would know better than I would of how everything works there. Not every single guy can snap the ball and kind of, not have your eyes on line of scrimmage and then react. But I think that's one that it interests me. And it's mainly because it was who was in front of him, because the body type for Shot looks like a center, moves like a center. So that's one that I think maybe there's a little bit of value that you can squeeze out of there that not every single team would be thinking about as close as we are to following this program.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, when you have Tyler Linderbaum at center, you're not going to get a lot of snaps there, right? So you're going
Yeah.
to stick to that guard spot. I want to actually jump over. You mentioned the fact that maybe a UDFA, maybe a guy, kind of developmental guy in the right system. Did you expect Matt Nelson to actually be a quality tackle, like even a backup tackle in the NFL? I mean, what a ridiculous transition to make when you go to the NFL. Any thoughts on Matt Nelson before we go on to the next player?
God bless him, man. Switching the sides of the ball, that's amazing. Making money out of it. That's surprising considering Iowa typically would flip those guys over beforehand, but that's not
Yeah,
the only switching
Parker
sides of the
Hesse.
ball. Parker Hesse too, yeah, doing the
Yeah.
same thing. So
And actually
it
playing well at tight end. Like,
yep.
it's so confusing.
Draft good, smart athletes that are hard workers and find a good spot for them. And guess what? If they're that smart and that good and versatile, you can flip sides of the ball and figure out other usages for them.
Yeah, man, love it. Well, it's fun to see that. It's fun to have those stories. It's also fun when you talk about Iowa's tight end U, and you have a defensive end playing tight end from Iowa in the NFL. Let's move on to another. I mean, the next two guys are incredibly smart, hardworking guys as well. Zach Van Valkenburg, a D2 transfer, came back for his 6th year of eligibility at this point with the COVID year. He's a guy who didn't. I think I saw actually his testing from the pro day. I'll try to pull it up. Not the best athlete by any means, but kind of reminds me of maybe a little bit above average Jack Heflin, who actually landed with the Packers, which shocked the heck out of me. What are your thoughts on Zach Van Valkenburg? Do you see him sticking with a team at the next level, kind of as a backup reserve defensive end?
He's got a chance. The biggest thing that he has going against him is that he is older. I think he's going to be 23,
Yeah.
24 years old, for a position like the edge rusher, where once you hit 30, guys typically fall off pretty drastically around that age, unless you're talking about the freaks of the freaks. So you're not going to get as much value towards the end of his contract, or even a second contract with him. But he rushed the passer pretty well this last year, pulling up he was the number one rated player according to Pro Football Focus. 37 pressure on the defense, 37
Yep.
pressures, 22 hurries. That's pretty valuable. It's just the age that he was at, and talking about the testing earlier. I wish we had the testing numbers for somebody like Zach Van Valkenburg, because there is no position where athletic testing, whether it be the 40 10-yard split, vertical, broad, translates as 1-for-1 as the edge rushing spot. It's probably a big reason why teams are. That's a position that it doesn't bust as much too. It's because something tangible actually translates to the field. Unlike if you look at the off-ball linebackers in the first round of the last 5 to 10 years, it's a graveyard of busts, because what they're asked to do value-wise is more instincts and processing, and then it gets to the athleticism and the size before that. But for pass rushers, don't have to think so much. Athleticism, size, power, length, it all translates. So wish we had the data for that one just to kind of rank him against the peers, but the age probably puts him down 6, 7 round, maybe undrafted.
Okay. Is there any sort of scheme that he would make sense in more than others?
I think he's versatile enough that you can do either scheme. I do think that while he is about 265, I never thought he was a super great power player with setting the edge. So I'd be more interested in a scheme where he can do a little bit of stand up stuff, run around as well, maybe some twists and counters. But everyone in the NFL right now is essentially playing some variation of 4-2-5 base, of 3-4, 4-3. The run fits matter and what they do with the safeties matter. But I'm more interested in honestly what the coverage preferences are in the back end versus the defensive fit on the front, especially the edge rusher. Pin your ears back and get back. For the defensive tackle, it matters more, 2 gap, 1.5 gap. But for edge, I'm not as worried. I think he's got enough versatility there.
Makes sense. That was honestly a filler question while I found the data for Zach Van Valkenburg. So I was trying to pull it up so I could make sure we talked about it. Checked in at 263 pounds, a 31.5-inch vertical, a 9.5-foot broad jump, 4.88 40, a 4.34 short shuttle, 22 on the bench, and a 7.07 3-cone.
Yeah, those are okay. They're fine. Not terrible. There's always a little bit of home cooking with the pro day numbers as well. So and then when it's released, it's a lot of times from the teams, not from the scouts. So they don't always measure the exact same. I will say, though, this year, I don't know if you heard this, the Indianapolis Colts put in a new turf in 2020. And this was the first year there was a combine on this new turf. And everybody was running faster
That
than
makes so much sense.
ever before. Yep. So there are teams actually in the league that are adding like a full 10th of a second onto everybody's 40 time
to normalize
it. Yep. For dating years back. So the verticals and the broads are still, the turf doesn't change that, but the 40s are not as historically accurate when you're looking at it. This wasn't just, the fastest class of all time, whatever. It's because of the turf was a little bit, little faster for these guys as well.
That makes a lot of sense. And it's worth noting that these numbers were released by their agencies, so possibly even slightly more home cooked. Let's move over to Jack Kerner, who I also have his numbers up. I'm going to run those through for you real quick. 6 foot. I always get so confused in the height. Whatever. 6 foot, 209 pounds. I don't know how to read this. Whatever. Vertical 38 inches, a 10.2 broad jump, a 4.51 40, a 4.08 short shuttle, 20 on the bench, and a 6.91 3-cone. Initial reactions to those numbers.
The numbers are fine. Again, there's nothing there that really stands out as wow, but also nothing there makes me have to go back to the tape as far as like if you ran a 4.4 or a sub 4.4, I'm like, okay, wait a second, I'm missing something here. So that's fine. I do like that he measured in. What did you say the weight was again? Sorry, after you put your
209 pounds.
209, that's good. If he was going to be, 210 or 199, then we'd have some concerns about him. His path to the field is special teams. And so that's going to have to be a lot of intelligence, a lot of physicality, and sacrificing your body some. But there's a reason that I was talking about Jake Gervais earlier. I think that's probably the pathway for him making it in the league. Probably back into the roster guy. Definitely, I would say very likely an undrafted free agent as well, especially in this safety class this year. It's pretty good, but he's going to have a chance to make it in the league for a while, and it'll be fun to follow, see what he does in football, because he does seem like a very high football character guy all around.
Yep.
And if he doesn't stick in the league for long, he's going to do something in football. I'd be shocked if that was not the case.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned Jake. Iowa has this weird penchant for finding walk-ons out of the state of Iowa who all of a sudden win a job as a sophomore that no one saw, and that was Jake. It's now Jack. Quinn Schulte is possibly up next, another walk-on as well. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. The Jake thing. Would you comparing Jake and Jack together? Which would you rather have coming out of Iowa?
Probably Jake. But this is a little bit of we know that he's did good enough to stick in the league for a bit. So that's a little bit more data and a little bit more of a sure thing compared. So I'll probably go with the surety there. I'm probably not. I mean, can I argue between Hooker and Belton maybe instead, or a little bit more fun on that one? But no, yeah, they'll be fun to follow their careers.
All right. And then Ivory Kelly Martin is the last guy up here that I want to talk about. Does he even have a shot? Like, I mean, his testing wasn't that great. I think he ran a 4.5 or 4.54 40 for a guy who was known to be the speed guy at Iowa. I know he's dealt with a lot of injuries. does he have a shot at all? I mean, other than being maybe a camp body, maybe being a tryout guy, seeing if he can even land on the 90 roster. Or what are your thoughts on that?
Camp body for sure, but he's going to have to be special teams purely. I mean, that's what Iowa liked him a lot for there. Apparently a good leader as well. And if you want somebody like that in your camp or one of your inactives, practice squad kind of guys, that makes some sense. But his path is special teams, without a doubt, as a gunner or blocking for somebody else as well. And that's fine for a third running back in general. I do think that probably doesn't stick around with the athletic testing. You mentioned the tape isn't all that incredible, but also the way he put the ball on the ground is a non-negotiable for a lot of teams. So that's still special teams character. You have a chance to make it in the league and make some money in the league if you are good at those things.
Yeah, I mean, he's a fantastic gunner. Did a great
Yep.
job,
Yep.
opposite of Terry Roberts. So
Yep.
I got the numbers up: 5'10", 200 pounds, 4'5", 240, a 399 short shuttle, 6'6", 3-cone, and 33.5-inch vertical, a 9'3" broad jump. So not overly explosive, which you would like to see from a guy who is supposed to be explosive. So fun. Well, that is, I believe that's every Iowa football player that is draftable in this draft. I always wrap it up with the end of the show with you. Every year we've done this. Any guys you're excited about next year? I think last year you actually called out Jack Campbell. He decides to return. Any guys you want to call out as someone you're excited about for next year's draft?
Oh man, next year's draft for the Iowa Hawkeyes. I mean, everybody knows those guys who came back are probably day 2 kind of picks type caliber of athletes. Jack Campbell is definitely one. Sam Laporta is another one. You mentioned Jacobs, the linebacker there. He's definitely one that he's gonna have to work in his box ability as well. I'm curious to see how that works with Seth Benson. Ideally, you'd see Jacobs kind of start over Benson with the upside, the length, the athleticism there, but processing and taking on blocks and filling the gaps comes first before all that other stuff for the linebacker. So that's one that's interesting to me. See how he does. I'm probably most excited. This is just my roots here, but the defensive line. You have 2 young guys, redshirt sophomores in Yaha Black. I think that's how you pronounce the first name.
Why?
Black. Yep, I've read it 100 times, but I haven't heard it.
Believe me, I've heard a lot of people get in my DMs when I screw up names, so that's why.
Well, good for them because they should.
Yeah.
I have way too many names that I'm going over anyways. And also I pulled up, okay, now you gave me trivia. The last center to go in the top 10. What year?
1982.
1968.
Oh man, I was gonna go 70s, but wow, that is ridiculous.
Yeah. So again, it's not a value. It hasn't been a value position in a long time, and it's because the body types are not as rare. There's a very specific type of body that you need for tackle, for edge, et cetera, et cetera. Center, if you're good and smart, we can plug you in there. We'll work it out. So just not a value position by the league. And if he gets drafted in the first round in general, that's a rare list in itself for the center. So shout out Tyler Linderbaum. The other one here that Hawkeye fans should be excited about for 2022. We saw him last year. I'm really curious to see what his role is going to be, but I love Van Ness. Man, that dude just works offensive lineman, interior offensive lineman. I think there's some inside outside ability with him. So I'm really excited to see what he can do these next few years as well, especially both those guys, Black and Van Ness, getting another year in the strength and conditioning program and playing some Big Ten football.
I mean, it's going to be a lot of fun, a lot of youth on this defensive line for the first time in several years. We are not replacing 3 or 4 defensive linemen. It'll be fun to see the continuity of those guys and being able to grow. I just want to quickly mention Riley Moss is a guy who, as long as he can stay healthy, it is going to be a lot of fun to see what happens. I think we could see Jamari Harris or Terry Roberts have a big year opposite of Riley Moss, just because people are going to be trying to avoid the Big Ten Defensive Back of the Year, and probably who could have won National Defensive Back of the Year as well had he stayed healthy for the entire season. We saw how that defense struggled a little bit without Riley Moss. Nick, as always, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Any last words you want to talk about for Iowa or draft talk?
You guys can catch me over at Mile High Huddle. I do live streams and podcast for the network Monday, Tuesday, Thursday morning at 7:30 Mountain Time, as well as Tuesday at 6 p.m. Mountain Time and Saturday at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. So 6 shows a week, each of them an hour long, sometimes an hour and a half long, depending on how the chat's going there. So a lot of draft talk, mostly Broncos centric, but have a lot of fun as well. It's whatever the chat wants to talk about. We'll have a good time. And you can catch me on Twitter making memes and jokes and being in a much happier place now that I don't have to act like I don't believe in Ounce and Drew Lock now that the Broncos actually have a quarterback. It's not a fun place. Hawkeye fans should know too. When you don't have a quarterback you believe in, it can be a little bit rough. It's even worse in the NFL because if you don't have the guy, there's no that's correlation for sure. You can kind of work your way through not having a great quarterback at the college level. It still helps a lot, but not as much as at the NFL level. So definitely
Yeah.
enjoying myself more there. You can follow me on Twitter at Nick Kendell MHH.
I love, man. I will say before we hop off, the Broncos last year, like I said, I had to disengage. Part of it was I couldn't engage as much, but also
Yeah.
I just personally disengaged because I just couldn't take another year of watching this team be just slightly below average in a lot of games, not actually good enough to win the games or not, well coached enough to win these games, poor quarterback play. I will tell you, man, it was one of the most refreshing NFL seasons I've had in a long time. Watching the Broncos lose did not crush me for like 6 days. It honestly, like, I think it was good for my health. I think I might have gained a year or two on my life, or I guess not lost, or a year or two, I should say. This year, though, it is fully back on. I am way too excited for Russell Wilson. My wife's going to kill me on Saturdays and Sundays when Iowa and Denver lose. It's like D-Day in my house. Just bad vibes all around, man. Nick, as always, it's been a pleasure having you on. This will be the last time we're on the show together here, but as you said, you can find Nick at Nick Kendell MHH. You can find me at Wade_Andrew. Appreciate you all tuning in to another episode of the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Have a fantastic day, and as always, Hawkeye Nation, let's go Hawks.